Americans for Fair Taxation presents the Weekly Chairman's Report, written by Steve Hayes, president of Americans for Fair Taxation, and recorded by Bob Paxton, a volunteer with the Florida FAIRtax Educational Association. And now, this week's Chairman's Report.
Hello, I'm Bob Paxton with the AFFT Chairman's Report for Friday, June 25th, 2021. The IRS denies tax exemption to Texas religious group because prayer and Bible reading boost the Republican Party. Now, all of us are familiar with nonprofit charitable organizations. Many of us know that these organizations qualify as exempt under Section 501c3 of the Internal Revenue Code. Many organizations, such as the Red Cross, the Boys and Girls Club, the Boy Scouts of America, the American Heart Association, Planned Parenthood, PETA, and many others, all enjoy exempt status. Now, this exemption is quite valuable to an organization in two primary ways. First, donations made to an exempt organization are not considered taxable income to the organization. And second, money donated to an exempt organization is tax deductible to the donor. So this makes exempt organizations much more attractive to donors than non-exempt ones. For example, let's say you want to support a missionary effort in Africa and you have $1,000 to donate. There are two organizations to which you are considering making your donation. One is exempt, one is not. If you give your money to the non-exempt organization, the donation is not deductible for you and it is taxable to the organization. So for many of us, that means that we would have to earn $1,200 pre-tax in order to net the $1,000 to give to the non-exempt organization. And then, when the organization receives the money, the IRS taxes that non-exempt organization on that money just like any other business. So, by choosing to donate to the non-exempt organization, you had to earn $1,200 in order to provide the organization with $800 that they could use. However, if you donate to the exempt organization, your $1,000 donation actually costs you only $800 because it saves you $200 on your income tax. Plus, the organization gets to keep the entire $1,000. That's quite a difference. Finally, exempt status provides another huge benefit to an organization. It gives it legitimacy because people assume that real, legitimate charities will have qualified for the exemption. Now, the IRS defines exempt purposes as charitable, religious, educational, scientific, literary, testing for public safety, fostering national or international amateur sports competition, and preventing cruelty to children or animals. The term charitable is used in its generally accepted legal sense and includes relief of the poor, the distressed, or the underprivileged, advancement of religion, advancement of education or science, erecting or maintaining public buildings, monuments, or works, lessening the burdens of government, lessening neighborhood tensions, eliminating prejudice and discrimination, defending human and civil rights secured by law, and combating community deterioration and juvenile delinquency. The IRS further defines how to qualify as tax exempt under Section 501c3. An organization must be organized and operated exclusively for exempt purposes set forth in Section 501c3. None of its earnings may be diverted to any private shareholder or individual. It may not be an action organization, i.e., it may not attempt to influence legislation as a substantial part of its activities, and it may not participate in any political campaign activity for or against any candidate. Now, in order to be recognized as exempt under the Internal Revenue Code, an organization has to complete an application to the IRS that explains why it should be exempt. This application is reviewed by people within the IRS. Now, these reviewers are supposed to approve or disapprove the application based solely on whether or not the organization meets the definition of exempt purposes. Unfortunately, though, there have been times in the past where applicants were not judged based on the definitions, but were denied exempt status because the organization's purpose appeared to be at odds with the IRS reviewers' personal biases. The IRS denies tax exemption to Texas religious group because prayer and Bible reading boost the Republican Party. Now, that's the title of an article that appeared in the Epoch Times. This article sets forth the statements of Stephen A. Martin, director of the IRS Office of Exempt Organizations, Rulings and Agreements, in explaining why he denied the application by Christians Engaged to be a tax-exempt organization. Mr. Martin stated, "You do not qualify as an organization described in IRS Section 501c3. You engage in prohibited political campaign intervention. You are also not operated exclusively for one or more exempt purposes within the meaning of Section 501c3 because you operate for a substantial non-exempt private purpose and for the private interests of the Republican Party. Specifically, you educate Christians on what the Bible says in areas where they can be instrumental, including the areas of sanctity of life, the definition of marriage, biblical justice, freedom of speech, defense, borders and immigration, and U.S. and Israeli relations. The Bible teachings are typically affiliated with the Republican Party and its candidates. Therefore, this disqualifies you from exemption under IRS Section 501c3. In conclusion, Mr. Martin is probably surprised to hear that many Americans are outraged by his statements. He's in effect saying that Christians Engaged doesn't qualify for tax-exempt status because they teach principles that would lead people to vote Republican. Now, it's a good bet that Mr. Martin is surrounded by colleagues at the IRS who share his anti-Republican views and only want nonprofits that support the Democratic Party and its ideas. If Christians Engaged were pushing ideas typically affiliated with the Democratic Party and its candidates, is there any doubt that their application would have been approved? Like the infamous Lois Lerner, who blocked the applications of any group that might seem conservative, the actions of Mr. Martin is a great example of the way that unelected IRS bureaucrats are determined to impose their own political agendas on the rest of us, who they believe are not as smart as they are. Now, certainly Mr. Martin knows about Planned Parenthood, an organization that enjoys tax-exempt status. Now, does anyone believe that the people who donate to Planned Parenthood don't have a political agenda, or that Planned Parenthood doesn't try to help the Democratic Party? Theodore Parker was a Unitarian church minister whose writings influenced Abraham Lincoln. He said, "Facts are true, independent of all human opinion." Now, the facts in this case are that Mr. Martin did not follow the law. He substituted his own personal bias for the law. He denied Christians Engaged their exempt status because they teach principles that would lead people to vote Republican. He said so himself. Now, to be fair, it would be equally wrong to deny a group's application for exempt status because they teach Democrat principles. While some today are applauding Mr. Martin's actions, it's a certainty that if the current system remains in place, the day will come when an organization is denied exempt status because a Republican-leaning IRS reviewer didn't think that exempt organizations should be teaching Democrat principles. The facts are that Mr. Martin did not follow the law, but instead used the law to deny an organization exempt status because of his desire to help the Democratic agenda and not independent of all human opinions. Mr. Martin is the poster boy for the reason to eliminate the IRS, the federal, individual, and corporate income taxes, the estate tax, and the gift tax, and replace it all with the FAIRtax. The FAIRtax is the best way to fund the federal government, and it ensures that bureaucrats like Mr. Martin cannot substitute their own bias for what the law says. The FAIRtax is collected anonymously at the cash register on the retail purchase of new goods and services. There are no forms to file, and the government no longer has any legitimate need for any of your personal financial data. If you have friends who don't know about the FAIRtax, send them to FAIRtax.org. Have them watch the whiteboards under how it works, and if they agree, ask them to please join us. You can share with them this quote from economist John Maynard Keynes, who was asked why he changed his position on an economic issue. "When my information changes, I alter my conclusions. What do you do, sir? When I'm wrong, I change my mind." Then contact your members of Congress and the President and demand that Congress pass the FAIRtax, the only truly fair tax.
This has been the Weekly Chairman's Report, written by Steve Hayes, President of Americans for Fair Taxation. Check back every week for news and information about the fair tax, and learn why the fair tax should replace our antiquated federal income tax system. If you'd like to receive a copy of the Chairman's Report in your inbox every week, sign up at FAIRtax.org.